I am the Philosophical Bachelor, and today we will continue our journey with the Tao Te Ching, starting from chapter 37. The Tao is ever inactive, yet there is nothing left undone. If the king can maintain the Tao, all things will reform themselves. If after reform they still desire to act, I shall restrain them with the Tao in its inexpressible simplicity. Restrained with the inexpressible simplicity of the Tao, they will also then not desire. Not desiring and still, the world then self-corrects. When we act non-assertively, it is the way of the Tao, because the Tao acts in the same non-assertive way. Just like how, in that way, the Tao leaves nothing undone, when we act like the Tao, nothing will be left undone also, according to Lao Tzu. All the rulers have to do is to follow the Tao, and everything will fix themselves. Yet the people have freedom, since even after they self-reform, they may still wish to act to fulfill their self-serving desires. Lao Tzu says that the king should then restrain them with the Tao, which I take to mean that he will teach them the nature of the Tao and its ethical implications, the way Lao Tzu has spelt it out in the Tao Te Ching, though this teaching is not so much through words, but demonstration through his own example. Chapter 38. Superior virtue is not virtuous, therefore it has virtue. What inferior virtue does not lose its virtuousness, and therefore it lacks virtue. Superior virtue is non-assertive, and need not assert, while inferior virtue is non-assertive, and yet asserts. Superior benevolence acts though it need not act, while extreme justice acts and needs to act. Extreme ritualism acts, and when people do not respond, it rolls up its sleeve and enforces itself. Hence, when the Tao is lost, virtue emerges. When virtue is lost, benevolence emerges. When benevolence is lost, then justice emerges. When justice is lost, then ritualism emerges. Observers of ritual have weak sincerity and faith. Their rise marks the beginnings of disorder. Fortune tellers are like flowers of the Tao, but are the beginnings of foolishness. Thus the great person abides by what is thick and not thin, by the fruit and not the flower, choosing one over the other. This chapter 38 is talking about substance over form, what Lao Tzu calls the fruit over the flower. Superior virtue is superior to inferior virtue because its possessor has the substance and not just the form. It is not self-righteous, not what today is called virtue signaling, but carries out its virtue whether it is acknowledged or not, while inferior virtue is one where its possessor wishes to be seen acting virtuously, more concerned with the appearance of virtue than its reality. To be truly benevolent is to be benevolent even to those undeserving of benevolence. Extreme justice is to execute justice, respecting the letter but not the spirit of the law. Extreme ritualism is to carry out rituals mindlessly, no longer even understanding the significance behind the rituals. Lao Tzu lays out a hierarchy. Tao is greater than virtue, is greater than benevolence, is greater than justice, is greater than ritualism. In chapter 21, Lao Tzu tells us that the Tao is dark, a mystery, but virtue is not. Virtue is the visible expression of the Tao. Here in chapter 38, Lao Tzu writes, when the Tao is lost, virtue emerges. How can this apparent contradiction be understood? Because the Tao is lost, because it is mysterious, it is precisely why we have to find it through virtue. Similarly, if we were all perfectly virtuous, we would not need benevolence or justice, since we will already be benevolent and just. There will be no crime and hence no need for justice. As for Lao Tzu's criticism of ritualism, putting it in last place, criticizing its observers as having weak sincerity and little faith, and how it is the beginning of disorder, this is in contradiction to Confucius' teachings, which emphasize ritual as the way to abide with the Tao. To be fair, Lao Tzu is criticizing extreme ritualism and not rituals per se, just like he is criticizing inferior virtue and not virtue per se. When we behave ritualistically, without even understanding the meaning of the rituals, that is when rituals become something carried out for its own sake, divorced from its intended significance. It is insincere and devoid of value, like hoping that just showing up at the gym without putting in the work is enough to become fit. Fortune-telling does not even make the list. Lao Tzu condemns it as stupidity. It resembles the flower of Tao because it looks pretty and seems to be related to the Tao, but it cannot bear the fruit of Tao, instead placing one on the path to foolishness. Interestingly, the word for fruit that Lao Tzu uses here, shi, can be read as fruit or as real. Hence his point is to value the real and not what looks pretty. Chapter 39. Things that have attained oneness since the past. Heaven became one and pure. Earth became one and was tranquil. Mind became one and became spirit. Valley became one and was full. All things became one and had life. Princes and kings became one and brought order to the world. By implication, if heaven was not pure, it will crack. If earth was not tranquil, it will be laid waste too. If mind was not spirit, it will be inactive. If the valley was not full, it will run dry. If all things had no life, they would become extinct. If princes and kings were not noble, they would be toppled. The noble is based on the humble, the high on the low. Therefore, princes and kings refer to themselves as orphaned, widowed, and unworthy. Is this use of humility as the basis suspect? Too much honor is not honorable. Therefore, they do not want to glimmer like jade, but be dull like rocks. According to Lao Tzu, unity brings purity, tranquility, spirituality, fullness, life, and order, while division brings death and destruction. Because rulers know that their claim on power comes from their nobility, and that nobility comes from being humble, since too much honor makes the people detest them, they try to project themselves as humble. As chapter 42 explains, some things gain by being diminished or are diminished by gain. If they seem too elevated, the people's esteem of them will be harmed. Knowing this, they try to diminish themselves in order to benefit. Lao Tzu recognizes and explains this seemingly paradoxical behavior, though it is unclear if he approves that the high and mighty should humble themselves, or he disapproves that they are projecting a false humility in order to manipulate the people's emotions in order to strengthen their grip on power. Nonetheless, he sees through it. Chapter 40. Opposition is the movement of the Tao. Weakness is the way the Tao works. All things under heaven have life. Life comes from nothingness. The Tao is about going with the flow of nature, but here in chapter 40, Lao Tzu tells us it is opposition that characterizes the movement of the Tao. How from nothingness comes something, how weakness is the way to conquer strength, how acting non-assertively is the way that all things will get done. This idea of opposition also has a paradoxical quality, with the teachings of the Tao running contrary to what we usually understand to be the way, which is, if you want something, grab it. Put yourself front and center. Yielding is for losers. Winning at life is to have more wealth and stuff. Having more power and exerting it because might makes right. Having the means to satisfy your desires and then satisfying them is what brings happiness. The way to fight power is with power. To beat the strong, one has also to be strong. Certainly not weak the way the Tao teaches, that to meet strength with weakness is the way to defeat it. A prevailing theme of the scientific worldview is not of abiding with nature, but to learn more about it in order to master it, conquer it, use and manipulate it to suit our purposes. The Tao certainly opposes these views, that just as life comes from nothingness, which is the nature of the Tao, we have to try to regain our balance, neither too much yin nor too much yang, but to have both in harmony and not be swept up by the ways of the world. Chapter 41. When the superior scholar hears of the Tao, she diligently practices it. When the average scholar hears of the Tao, she sometimes keeps it, sometimes loses it. When the lesser scholar hears of the Tao, she has a big laugh. Yet if this laughter is insufficient, it would not be the Tao. Thus it has been said, the Tao when bright seems dark. Progress in Tao seems like regress. The smooth path seems convoluted. Superior virtue is like a valley. The greatest white seems solid. The amplest virtue seems insufficient. To develop virtue seems like stealing. The plain truth seems changeable. A great square has no corners. A big machine can only be completed late. Great music is slight in sound. A great image has no shape. The Tao is hidden and has no name, yet it is only the Tao that is good at imparting and completing. This chapter 41 further develops the paradoxical nature of the Tao. While the serious diligently practices the Tao, the average sometimes manages to practice, sometimes fails to practice, while the lesser takes the Tao to be a funny fiction. Yet such a difference is necessary since not everyone can understand the Tao. If everyone can understand it, then it is not the Tao, as chapter 1 tells us. To understand the Tao is to understand that it is a mystery. To advance in the Tao requires simplifying our lives, which can appear regressive for those who observe from the outside. To reduce his desires, a new follower may go from wearing ostentatious clothes and feasting to wearing simple dark clothes and eating simply. He may give away his excess wealth and reject money-making opportunities. Instead of giving speeches in public, he may block the passage and close the door in order to meditate and contemplate the nature of the Tao. While the principles of the Tao are simple, to truly walk its path is difficult. Everything that used to seem important now is recognized as empty. Even the best things contain blemishes, in line with the yin-yang conception. What is thought to be known now seems uncertain when viewed at the scale of the absolute, like how a square, when stretched to infinity, has no corners. Paradoxes come in different forms, as illustrated by all these various instances that Lao Tzu mentions in this chapter 41. Attempting to be virtuous can feel dishonest. Lao Tzu tells us in chapter 39 about princes and kings projecting false humility, but yet even if their humility was sincere, they may feel as if they were faking it or are doing it just to manipulate the people. A more common example I can think of is how some people try to be good because they want to go to heaven. instead of being good simply because it is good and the right thing to do. If you want to build a big machine, it requires more time than a smaller, simpler one. Great music does not necessarily have to be great in volume. It can be soft yet wonderful. As often expressed in modern art, a good piece of modern art does not necessarily depict images and forms. Finally, the paradox of the Tao is that even though it is a mystery, it is what makes everything happen and complete. Chapter 42. The Tao gives birth to one gives birth to two gives birth to three gives birth to all things. All things bear yin, yet embrace yang, harmonized by qi. People fear being orphaned, widowed, unworthy, and yet kings take these as appellations. Thus, some things gain by being diminished or are diminished by gain. What people teach, I also teach. The violent and strong do not die a natural death. This is the father of my teaching. Goddard and Borel translates the first line of this chapter 42 as Tao produces unity, unity produces duality, duality produces trinity, trinity produces all things. The Tao precedes even unity. It is emptiness. From emptiness comes the one, unity. From unity comes duality, the yin, the feminine principle, and the yang, the masculine principle. These are harmonized by qi, the principle of vitality, giving rise to the trinity, and from this trinity of yin-yang qi comes all things. Just like in the duality, some people fear being orphaned, widowed, and being deemed unworthy. Yet some other people embrace these attributes. That is because the former is diminished when losing one's parents, spouse, and self-worth, while the latter gains by taking on these attributes as a sign of their humility. Live by the sword, die by the sword, whose idea comes from the Bible, is perhaps a more common statement of the idea Lao Tzu posed on how the violent and strong do not die a natural death. Might does not make right. The violent and strong do not enjoy the privilege of dying naturally, but instead are killed while engaging in their violent or forceful activities. Why is this the father of Lao Tzu's teaching? In chapter 16, he teaches that those who do not know eternity act rashly and fiercely, leading to death and reincarnation. By not following the Tao and living naturally, their deaths are also unnatural. His core ethical teaching is to live according to the flow of nature, and hence to die unnaturally is a terrible thing to befall a human being. Chapter 43. The softest things in the world outpace the hardest things in the world. That which has no substance can enter where there is no space. I know therefore the advantage of non-action, of teaching without words, of the advantage of non-action that few in the world can attain to. By yielding and being flexible, the soft outlasts the hard. The grass that is soft and flexible bends with the wind, while the tree that is strong and hard is broken by strong winds. What is immaterial can penetrate even where there is no space for anything material to penetrate. Wu Wei is hard to attain to because it is contrary to the ways of the world. Only the wise person can carry it out. Chapter 44. Reputation or life, which is dearer? Body or property, which matters more? Gain or loss, which is more painful? Strong attachments incur large expenses. Excessive hoarding entails large losses. To know contentment is not a disgrace. To know when to stop avoids danger and brings longevity. We need to understand what is more valuable. To cling to the less valuable takes a lot away from us, and the more we have, the more we have to lose. To be contented, to know when to stop, is wise, while to never be contented and to never know when it is enough is a blight. Chapter 45. Great accomplishment seems incomplete, but its usefulness is unimpaired. Great fullness seems empty, but its usefulness is unexhausted. The straightest seems crooked, great skill seems clumsy, great eloquence seems like stammering. Calmness defeats hot-headedness, cold defeats heat. Pure calm sets the world in order. If we are unable to put accomplishment and fullness to good use, then no amount of accomplishment or completeness is sufficient, making all deeds, no matter how skillful or eloquent, seem futile. Remaining calm and cool sets things right, while being heated upsets things. Chapter 46. When the world has the Tao, horses manure farmlands. When the world does not have the Tao, horses are bred outside the city for war. There is no bigger misfortune than not being contented, no bigger crime than having desires. Therefore, one who knows that enough is enough will always have enough. The same horses can be put to peaceful use or war. When we are on the Tao, horses help us plow the fields and nourish the crops, while when we are off the Tao, horses help us wrath devastation. Being contented and unafflicted by desires is the way of the Tao, while not knowing contentment and torn by desires is the way of death. It is not that we cannot have anything. The lion kills enough to satisfy its hunger and then ceases. It does not massacre, nor does it accumulate. Once one has enough, does striving for more make sense? Some may argue that excess gives more security, but at what point does the striving become sated? What use is there of a security that is always insecure because it always needs more? If one is never sated, then how can one find peace? Chapter 47. Without going outside, one can understand the world. Without looking out of the window, one can see the Tao of heaven. The further one goes, the less one knows. It is the wise person who does not need to go anywhere and yet knows, who does not need to see and yet be enlightened, do not act and yet succeed. Tao means way, but a way to where? In this chapter 47, Lao Tzu gives us the answer. Tao is a way to nowhere, the same way the Tao is emptiness. The way of the Tao is obviously not a physical path to some physical destination. In this chapter, he tells us we do not have to go anywhere or even look outside. In chapter 15, he tells us that those who preserve the Tao hide away from the world and continue to develop. In fact, the further outside we go in search of the Tao, the further we go away from the Tao. So where do we go and where do we look? Inwards. In chapter 12, he tells us that the wise person cares for the inner self and not what is external. In chapter 11, he talks about uniting our spirit without straying. In chapter 5, he talks about guarding our core understanding. Lao Tzu tells us in chapter 33 that the one who knows himself is enlightened. The knowledge of what we need to know is already within us, which is why meditation is the mode of choice to gain that knowledge. In chapter 16, he tells us to seek maximal emptiness and protect stillness seriously. How is this done if not through meditation? I put quote marks around knowledge because this knowledge is not propositional, not words, in the same way that the Tao is unnamed. It is instead knowledge gained through phenomenal experiences. Chapter 48. Those who learn gain daily. Those who follow the Tao lose daily. He loses and loses more until he arrives at non-action, not doing, and yet nothing is left undone. To gain the world must always be effortless. If effort is needed, the effort will never be enough to gain the world. As in chapter 47, the knowledge of the Tao is not propositional or book knowledge. It is a gradual emptying out of ourself, our desires, our self-assertion, and our self-importance until we finally arrive at acting non-assertively and have the assurance that in acting in accordance with the Tao, all that needs to be done will get done. Because we do not act assertively, it is effortless. We are simply going with the flow of nature, acting naturally in accordance with our natural intuitions. In that way, because we do not have to exert effort, the effect of our acts is unlimited. It is only because effort is not required that our effects are unlimited, because if we require effort, unlimited effects will then require unlimited effort, which we cannot master since we are limited creatures. Chapter 49. The wise person always has no heart mind, because his heart mind is the heart mind of the common people. To the good, I am good to them. To the bad, I am also good to them. That is virtue's goodness. To the faithful, I am faithful to them. To the unfaithful, I am also faithful to them. That is virtue's faithfulness. The wise person in the world is indifferent, but for the sake of the world, merges his heart mind with it. The common people concentrate their attention on him, and he treats them as his children. The sage's concern is not with himself, but with the people. He is good to people not out of reciprocity, since he is good to all, both the good and the bad. Whether the people are faithful or otherwise, he remains faithful to them. He is good and faithful not out of expectation of reciprocity and reward, but because it is good and right to be good and faithful. His virtue is constant. It does not depend on the response of others. For that reason, the people look to him and he cares for them. Chapter 50. From birth to death, 3 in 10 are followers of life, 3 in 10 are followers of death. From birth and moving towards the land of death also numbers 3 in 10. Why is this so? Because they live life intensely. Those good at conserving their lives travel on the road without meeting rhinoceros and tiger, and among soldiers fear not their armor or weapons. The rhinoceros finds no place to horn them. The tiger finds no place to claw them. Weapons no place to penetrate its blade. Why? Because for them, there is no land of death. Out of 10 people, 3 follow life, 3 follow death, 3 journey in life towards death, but that still leaves 1 more. The 9 burn themselves out by living at a high intensity, while the wise person conserves his life by not going where there are wild animals and avoiding war. He does not seek a life of adventure. As chapter 30 tells us, the wise ruler goes to war only if it cannot be avoided and withdraws once the goal is attained. Yet should he encounter wild animals and war, he is somehow not wounded according to Lao Tzu. One could interpret this as some kind of supernatural power, but I think what Lao Tzu meant is that the wise person may be mortally wounded, but yet the horn of the rhinoceros, the claw of the tiger, and the sword of the soldier does not find its target, because as chapter 16 tells us, the enlightened being knows eternity, is divine and immortal, so even death cannot harm him. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor, and I'll see you next week.